So, one of the things you learn when you watch TED Talks is that all the TED Talk speakers start by saying, so. So I'm not going to do that. I was exercised a couple of years ago by the thought of what would happen if I did something very small to something very tiny. The very tiny thing was a bacterium, and the very small thing was to multiply it by 2. Actually, multiplying by 2 is its favourite trick. I was inspired to do that by that guy, Craig Venter. About 2 years ago, Craig Venter is the famous geneticist. He worked on the Genome Project. About 2 years ago, he announced that he was God. Well, not exactly. He announced, though, that he'd created life, which is the sort of thing that gods get up to. What he'd done was to stitch together some DNA, stick it in a bag, and call it a bacterium. And that's what a bacterium is, of course. It's DNA in a bag. But this did what a bacterium should do. It grew for a bit, and then it multiplied by 2. So I wondered, what would happen if we gave this bacterium unfettered freedom to do what it liked to do for as long as it wanted to do it? The results were quite remarkable and gave me, and I hope you as well, a great insight into what life on Earth really means. Before we go into what actually happens, I'd better tell you something about DNA. There's my little snip. Can you see that? Yeah. The funny thing about DNA is it's a bit rubbish. Every now and then it goes like that. It sort of breaks in half. Now, that actually makes it interesting, because if it's stuck together forever and ever, it would be just like any other boring big molecule that just hung around. That wouldn't be interesting at all. If it's shattered into 1,000 pieces, then end of story. We'd never see that again. But because it snaps into 2 pieces, each one of these 2 wants to find a partner. And it's swimming around in this sort of sea of nucleotides and amino acids and proteins. And quite soon, they can find a partner. I've got here a collection of nucleotides, amino acids and things. And we'll try and find a partner for this fella first. Doesn't seem to like that one. No. Definitely doesn't like that one. There we've got a partner there, and indeed all the other ones managed to find some partner up with, very attracted to that one, and there we are, bonded. Fabulous. Okay, meanwhile, her other half is trying to find a partner over here, and it doesn't take very long, you'll be pleased to know, for them both to find partners. And now we've got 2 where before we had 1, and that is life. Quite soon, these of course snap apart because they're a bit rubbish. And then they find new partners, and then we got 4, and then we get 8, and then 16, and so on and so forth. So let's see what happens if we let this ramp around the world. There is Craig Venter's little baby. Sweet, isn't he? That's what he looks like. Well, for half an hour, and then he looks like that. And then he looks like that half an hour later, half an hour later, half an hour later. Well, to cut a long story short, after a day, he looked like that. He was about the size of a sugar cube. That's 100 billion Craig Venters in there. Half an hour later, of course, there were 200 billion. And then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, then 64, then 128. So we had, in the end, a box full of Craig Venters. 7 hours later, we got a container full of Craig Venters. Now, you've got to keep a tally on this. We've taken 1 day to get the sugar cube, 3.5 hours to get the box, 7 hours to get the container. That's exactly 1 day, 7.5 hours. Okay, so we've got a container full. Let's put it in a yard. There's the container yard with 1. It's looking a bit lonely. There's 2 now, and then half an hour later, there's 4. Half an hour later, we got 8, then 16, then 32, then 64, then 128, then 256, then 512, then 1,020. Thank you. You weren't the problem, the technology was the problem. That's great. So we got a container yard. Now, have you all, how long did that take? 1 day, 15.5 hours. Have you all visited the Tower of London? Okay, get there soon, because Craig Venter wants it as a creche. He's interested in the City of London. In fact, he's going to grow into it. Now, every time we click the button, it doubles the area, so we're going to have to zoom out a little bit. We're going into the East Enders, the West Enders, the North Enders, and the South Enders. We've got Greater London, and now we're expanding into the home counties. And now a chill of terror hits us because he's just about to enter Brighton. We don't like that, do we? So we're going to shift him over to, there we go. So now we've got a unit of measurement. We've got a Wales of Craig Venters. Shortly after that, we get a Scotland as well. In fact, very soon, we've got everybody on the west side except for those with the luck of the Irish. And half an hour later, I'm afraid all of Great Britain has gone. 1 day, 23.5 hours. On the stroke of midnight, Craig crosses the border into Europe. It doesn't take him 2.5 hours to mop up Europe, and now he reaches across the Atlantic. Hello, Great Britain. Goodbye, Great Britain. We have bigger fish to fry. We're going to conquer the world. North, south, east and west and all the bits in between. And it took us 2 days and 4 hours to cover the earth. Hey! But only skin deep. We lack ambition. There we are at the top. We're going to dig deep now. See how far we can go. 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm going to have to take a wider view now. That's the centre of the Earth down there. And you can't see him yet because he's very small on the surface. So onwards, onwards, onwards. And here he comes over the horizon down towards the centre. 2 days. And there we are. 2 days, 13 hours he's taken over the planet. I know you don't believe that bit, do you? That bit is just too incredible. So I'm going to have to show you. I've got a demonstration here. I didn't believe it either, so I had to do the experiment. I got a ball and I got a lump of plasticine the size of the ball, and I wrapped the lump of plasticine around the ball, and that's what I got. So that's the skin. Tells you something, doesn't it? And I'll just prove that that is the case if I wrap that all up. That shows you that when you buy a piece of fruit, nearly half of what you're buying is the peel. There you are. Proof. So that tells us two things. One is, my maths was right. 2 is, we're rubbish at doing volume. So there we have a full planet of Craig Venters. Now, interestingly at this moment, I should mention that if we were to give a typewriter to each of those gazillion back microbes in there, one of them would type 1/2 of one line of one of the plays of the complete works of Shakespeare. To be or not to be, that is. Which is a pretty good motto for a bacterium, I think you'll agree. And another bit of calculation will show us that actually we got till the end of the day to get the complete works of Shakespeare and of Ibsen, Chekhov and Henry Miller as well. So there we are. We are romping around the world. And here we are. And actually, you know, this doesn't work, does it? It doesn't happen. You're all looking at me. I see a mountain of cynicism there. You're thinking, this doesn't actually occur. Craig Venter hasn't taken over the world. You know, I've got 100,000 bacteria just there. I don't wake up any morning with a lump the size of Wales on the back of my hand. So what's going on here? Well, what's going on here is actually death, and lots of it. And the reason for death, or one of the main reasons for death, is that every one of those bacteria is slightly different from its neighbour. Here, look, you see this DNA here? Look, those are the two, but that one is slightly different from that one. It's a mutant. So every one of those bacteria is a variation, and that's good. That's a wonderful idea because, of course, that's evolution. And with a planet that's constantly changing, we have to constantly change the creatures that are living on it, otherwise we will never live. So there's Craig Venter, there's one of his children, there's another one, there's another one. Which one has the evolutionary advantage? Which one will take over the planet? We don't know. What we do know is that the others will fade away. And so we realize, this is the revelation that we get, that one of the most important things about life on Earth is death on Earth. Steve Jobs said that death was life's greatest invention. And he was right. He always was. He might also have said that life is death's great legacy. Because, of course, without death, it would be a pretty crowded planet by now. There really ought to be a monument to all those who have died in order to give us our life. And, of course, there is, and it looks like that. There it is. Look after it. It's yours. Tend it carefully. It's a graveyard as well as a playground. And it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the next generation, and the next generation, and the generation after that. We all have our turn, and then we have to leave. Okay, I've just had my turn, and now it's time for me to leave. Thank you very much for having me.